For 1,000 years, the official story of the Anasazi people of the American Southwest has been, well, it's been incredibly comforting.
Yeah, very tidy.
Tidy, exactly. It's the narrative that gets passed down in our textbooks. It's what park rangers recite to, millions of tourists every summer. And the story goes that around 1150 AD, the inhabitants of these highly advanced, heavily fortified cities of Chaco Canyon, they just simply packed up.
Right, just a peaceful relocation.
Yeah, according to the standard timeline, they supposedly just slowly migrated out of the area because of a severe drought, and then they peacefully assimilated into modern Pueblo tribes. It is presented as this very pragmatic, very logical relocation.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this is where it gets dark, there is a hidden detail in the archaeological record, a deeply disturbing detail that completely shatters that peaceful timeline.
It totally shatters it, because when you actually look closely at the physical evidence they left behind, it paints a picture not of some calm, organized migration, but of absolute screaming terror. I mean, let's establish what Chaco Canyon really was first. The Anasazi were this brilliant, sophisticated culture. They were master astronomers. They aligned their buildings perfectly with solar and lunar cycles.
Right, they weren't just scraping by.
No, not at all. They were incredible mathematicians. They built these massive structures, like up to 5 stories tall, with over 800 rooms. And these were all connected by a network of perfectly straight roads that stretched for hundreds of miles.
Which is wild for that time period.
It really is. Yet they abandoned all of it almost overnight. And forensic evaluations from 72 different ancient Anasazi sites proved exactly why.
And we're not talking about a couple of contested bone fragments here, right?
No, this data is extensive. It was most notably detailed in physical anthropologist Richard Turner's 1999 book, Man-Corn. Turner examined the skeletal remains, and he found unequivocal evidence of a widespread, sudden explosion of cannibalism.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The bones showed signs of extreme trauma, marrow extraction, and this thing called pot polish.
Wait, what is pot polish?
It's this smooth sheen that occurs on a bone when it's been boiled in a clay pot.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's undeniable. And the timeline shows this wasn't some long-standing ritualistic practice. It was a sudden, violent shift.
Right, so the people didn't just migrate. They scattered in what looks like complete paranoia. I mean, they completely abandoned the canyon floor and began retreating to these highly fortified mesas. And eventually they started building those famous, completely inaccessible dwellings high up on sheer cliff faces.
Right.
Like the ones you see at Mesa Verde.
Exactly. You have to ask yourself, right, who or what were they hiding from?
Yeah, because you don't haul hundreds of tons of sandstone up a vertical cliff face to build a house unless whatever is hunting you on the ground is, far worse than the daily risk of just falling to your death.
Right. It takes a massive amount of desperation to do that.
And to make things even stranger, there is a specific carving, a petroglyph of a giant 6-toed footprint in the rock wall behind a ruin called Pueblo Punido in Chaco Canyon. And the Parks Department has made this specific carving strictly, unequivocally off-limits to the public today.
Which really brings us to the core mystery here. We have a sudden collapse of a civilization. We have forensic evidence of unimaginable violence, and then physical artifacts that are actively being suppressed right now.
Exactly. So today on our deep dive, we are unpacking a highly controversial documentary, and we're looking at the massive stack of ancient historical texts, indigenous oral histories, and architectural records that it cites.
And it's a lot of material.
It is a whole lot, because our mission today is to trace this documentary's central, terrifying thesis, which is that the history of humanity is missing a major chapter. We are going to explore how the source material weaves together these abandoned canyons, suppressed artifacts, and even the blueprints of modern particle physics.
Right, to suggest a completely alternative history of our world.
Yeah. And to see if there is this occult pattern hiding in plain sight. I'm your host, by the way, and I'm joined, as always, by our resident expert researcher.
Glad to be here.
Oh.
And this is an investigative journey that really demands you look at the world differently. The documentary suggests a pattern of hidden knowledge that stretches from the deserts of New Mexico to the absolute highest levels of global power, and even into the founding architecture of the United States.
It's wild. So let's just jump right in. Let's start with the transition from what we can literally dig up in the dirt to the hidden oral traditions of the people whose ancestors actually lived there.
Yeah, the oral histories are key here.
Right, because the documentary features a really rare interview with Dr. Don Moose Jr. He's a third-generation Navajo medicine man, and he's a highly respected figure in his community. The investigator in the film notes how incredibly reluctant he was to even be filmed.
Hmm.
But he sat for 2 hours sharing stories passed down explicitly from his great-grandfather.
And what stands out immediately when you watch this is that Dr. Moose goes entirely off script from the Parks Department's official migration narrative.
Oh, completely.
Yeah, when the investigators asked him about the whole idea of a slow, peaceful migration due to drought, Moose essentially just laughed it off. He hesitated for a second, said something to the effect of, probably shouldn't tell you this, and then he revealed this hidden history.
Right.
According to these ancient Navajo legends, the Anasazi didn't just leave, they turned to dark sorcery, human sacrifice, and cannibalism after being driven completely insane.
Wait, driven insane by what? Because, skeptics will say oral traditions can distort over hundreds of years.
Yeah.
How does the documentary validate this specific claim?
Well, the documentary addresses that right away by highlighting the rigidity of Navajo oral tradition.
Okay.
I mean, these aren't just campfire stories that change every time you tell them.
Right.
They are historical records kept meticulously exact from generation to generation. It's a formal process. And the specific entity Moose described is chilling. He said the Anasazi were manipulated by a reptilian creature, one that was strangely depicted with a halo over its head.
A halo.
Yeah, a halo. And the legend claims this creature possessed the ability of mind control. That's what drove them to madness.
A reptilian creature with a halo that used mind control. I mean, it sounds like something out of a bad science fiction script, but we're talking about a centuries-old tradition here.
Exactly.
And it doesn't even stop there. Dr. Moose actually pulls out an illustrated book during the interview. And it's not some obscure text, it's a book used in Navajo Nation schools. He shows an artist's depiction of a giant. And he recounted stories of a time when the earth was literally infested with giant, cannibalistic, alien gods that stood like 30 to 40 feet tall, just devouring the local populations.
Yeah, 30 to 40 feet.
And some were described as human-like, while others were these monstrous human-animal hybrids.
That's right. And Dr. Moose recounted the legend of the White Shell Woman. According to the tradition, she gave birth to twin miracle-performing warriors. And one of them held the literal title, the Slayer of Alien Gods.
Wow, what a title.
Right. And together, they fought these giants and hybrids that were destroying mankind. He also spoke of a great flood that the creator used to wipe these monsters out.
Which is a detail that pops up everywhere.
It does. And the documentary includes a really fascinating historical anecdote right here. Dr. Moose mentioned that when European Christian missionaries first arrived in the Americas and started preaching the biblical stories of, the Nephilim giants and Noah's flood, the native elders just smiled at them.
Like, yeah, we know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They politely let the missionaries know that they already knew these stories. Their ancestors had passed down the exact same historical events for thousands of years.
It fundamentally challenges the idea that these are just isolated regional myths. The documentary argues that multiple unconnected civilizations were describing the exact same global event. But let me push back here for a second, just to play devil's advocate. If these massive reality-bending events actually happened, if giant hybrids were roaming the American Southwest, where is the physical proof? Because, a story is just a story without physical evidence.
Which is totally fair. And the investigator in the film asks that exact same question, which brings the focus to the writings on the walls, the stone records.
Okay.
In Chaco Canyon, and specifically at a site called Newspaper Rock in Utah, which dates back roughly 1,000 years before Christ, there's this massive, dense collection of ancient petroglyphs.
Mm-hmm.
And there is one recurring motif that the documentary really zeroes in on, and that's the spiral.
No, wait, spirals are everywhere in ancient art. I mean, usually archaeologists say they represent water or the passage of time or the sun. Why does the documentary claim they are something else entirely?
Because of how they are actively interacting with other figures in the carvings. You have to look at the whole picture. According to the source material's logic, in these specific ancient contexts, the spiral isn't merely decorative art. It represents an interdimensional portal.
Like a literal gateway.
A literal gateway used by entities to transport between worlds. The carvings explicitly depict supernatural creatures, monsters, and these anomalous beings emerging directly out of the centers of these spirals.
Oh, wow.
And in several depictions, the entity is still physically connected to the spiral by what looks like an umbilical-like tether.
And the imagery gets incredibly dark, too, because you also see carvings of regular humans being pulled into these spirals upside down while a monster emerges from the other side.
It's very graphic.
This isn't just one rogue artist experimenting with surrealism. This is a consistent, documented theme found at numerous sites throughout the canyon, and that brings us back to the missing footprints.
Right, the 6 toes.
Yeah. The investigator in the documentary went looking for the famous six-toed footprints of the giants that are supposedly carved into the canyon wall. Mainstream publications actually documented them decades ago, but when he went to the exact coordinates, he couldn't find them anywhere.
Which leads to a very revealing interaction caught on camera. The investigator stops a park ranger and asks directly where the 6-toed footprints behind Pueblo Bonito are located.
And let's play devil's advocate again for a second. The ranger doesn't deny they exist. He openly admits they are there, but says they are located in an off-limits area that's permanently closed off to the public. But a park ranger saying an area is off-limits could just mean it's structurally unsafe, it's a 1,000-year-old crumbling ruin, or maybe it's protected for conservation. Why does the documentary immediately jump to this massive government cover-up?
Well, that's the logical assumption for most people, absolutely.
Sure.
But the investigator points out the contradiction here. There are plenty of fragile petroglyphs in the park that you can view from a safe distance, behind a barrier or a rope. But this specific set of prints is entirely cordoned off from sight. You can't even get an angle on it. And the reason the documentary argues it's being suppressed is because of what a 6-toed footprint represents historically.
It's the genetic marker.
Exactly. This physical anomaly perfectly mirrors ancient texts from the completely other side of the planet. Genesis 6.4 speaks of the Nephilim as well. These part celestial, part terrestrial hybrids created when the sons of God mingled with the daughters of men.
Yeah.
But beyond just Genesis, the biblical book of Chronicles specifically mentions giants with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot.
So the documentary is connecting a footprint carved in New Mexico to a biblical giant from the Middle East.
Yes, because the detail of polydactyly, having 6 toes or fingers, is a globally consistent marker for these specific entities. From ancient Sumeria to Babylon to Greece to Rome and apparently to the deserts of Utah and New Mexico, you have an identical narrative.
Gods descending from heaven.
Right, or coming through spiral vortices, manifesting in flesh, bearing 6 digits, and bringing absolute terror to the human population.
Okay, so the documentary establishes that these ancient people weren't just drawing myths. They were documenting geographic locations of high energetic or, interdimensional activity. But if these sites were ancient portals, the source claims they aren't dead.
No, they're still very active.
And that brings us to the massive pivot the documentary makes from ancient history to modern technology, specifically Mount Graham in Arizona.
Yeah, Mount Graham is where the narrative shifts from historical analysis to modern geopolitics. And this is documented fact. The Vatican and NASA actually fought a protracted, highly publicized federal court battle against the San Carlos Apaches and various environmental groups.
And why? To secure the rights to build an incredibly advanced telescope facility on the very top of this specific mountain.
Which begs the question, Ryan.
Yeah.
Why fight a massive, expensive legal battle for that one specific mountain?
Yeah, if you just need high altitude and low light pollution for a telescope, there are plenty of peaks in the American West. Why force it on this one?
Well, according to the documentary, the location is the entire point. Mount Graham is considered one of the 4 holiest mountains in the world for the Apache. In their ancient mythos, it is not just a sacred hill, it is considered a literal stargate.
A stargate.
A supernatural gateway through which star people have entered our world since the dawn of time.
The Apache creation myth even involves the creator descending over that exact mountain in a yellow and white flying disc. I mean, they have legends of a deceiving dragon that speaks and a race of giant Goliaths that had to be destroyed by fire from the sky.
It echoes the Nephilim stories perfectly.
It really does. And on this very mountain, considered an active portal by the indigenous people, the Vatican installs the largest binocular telescope in the world. And I have to bring this up because when I first heard it, it sounded completely fabricated, but the source documents it.
Acronym.
Yeah. This telescope houses an incredibly powerful infrared instrument officially named the Lucifer device.
It sounds absurd, but it's a verifiable acronym. It originally stood for the Large Binocular Telescope Near Infrared Utility, with camera and integral field unit for extragalactic research.
That is such a forced acronym.
The irony is certainly thick. But the documentary asks you to look at the mechanism here, not just the name. Infrared technology detects heat signatures and spectrums of light that are invisible to the naked human eye.
Right.
The film posits that if you were trying to monitor an interdimensional gateway, a place where entities phase into our reality, you wouldn't just use a standard optical lens. You would use advanced infrared technology.
That is a staggering leap to make.
It is.
But within the logic of the documentary, it connects. And it uses that logic to bridge the pursuit of high-altitude portals to another massive modern technological endeavor, the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland.
Ah, CERN. This is where the source finds its most compelling modern contradiction. Because CERN is supposed to be the absolute pinnacle of rational, materialist, secular science.
Yeah, it's physicists and lab coats.
Exactly. It's a multi-billion-dollar facility dedicated to smashing subatomic particles at 99.9% the speed of light to understand the Big Bang.
Right.
But the physical facility itself is absolutely steeped in occult and religious symbolism.
Right, like outside their main facility, CERN proudly displays a large bronze statue of Shiva, the Hindu god of destruction. Specifically, it depicts Shiva performing the Nataraja, which is the cosmic dance of destruction that ends the universe. Now, scientists love a good metaphor for the creation and destruction of matter.
Too.
But the documentary points out that a significant section of the CERN facility is actually built upon a commune in France that, during Roman times, was called Apolliacum. It was an ancient town and temple explicitly dedicated to Apollo the Destroyer.
And this is where the documentary forces you to look at the actual physics being conducted. CERN's Large Hadron Collider is literally searching for extra dimensions.
Yeah.
They are looking for theorized particles, like gravitons in string theory, that could prove gravity is leaking into our universe from another dimension.
Which is mainstream science.
Yes. But the documentary weaponizes this real scientific pursuit to claim that CERN isn't just observing these dimensions, they are actively attempting to interact with them.
Because the documentary quotes officials at CERN themselves stating that the Large Hadron Collider could find other dimensions, or that out of this door, something might come, or we might send something through it.
They use the word door.
Yeah, and if you think the Shiva statue is just a quirky scientific metaphor, the documentary brings up the Gotthard Base Tunnel in Switzerland.
Oh, the ceremony.
Yeah, it is located just a few hours from CERN. When they opened this, it's the world's deepest and longest railway tunnel in 2016. European leaders like Angela Merkel and François Hollande attended a live-streamed opening ceremony that was, well, deeply disturbing doesn't quite cover it.
No, it was an incredibly bizarre, heavily occultic piece of performance art. And it cost millions of euros to produce.
It wasn't just a ribbon cutting.
Not at all. The ceremony featured an interfaith blessing at first, but then it rapidly devolved. It featured a parade of these zombie-like miners, fallen angels suspended from the ceiling by wires, and this massive screen displaying a terrifying screaming face.
I remember watching clips of that when it happened.
Yeah, it went viral. But the centerpiece was a horned goat-man entity, an infernal master of ceremonies that heavily resembled the Christmas demon Krampus, or the pagan horned god.
Yeah.
And the dancers performed simulated human sacrifice and mock death rituals, bowing and offering subservience to this goat entity that was depicted mating with the dancers and just shrieking in a tuxedo.
It is wild footage, and the official explanation was just that it was an avant-garde theatrical representation of the local folklore of the Alps.
Right, just art.
But the documentary asks a much more pointed question here. If these European scientific and engineering projects are strictly about exploring particle physics or just digging transit routes for trains under a mountain, why is there this intense, hyper-ritualistic focus on the ancient gods of the underworld?
Well, the source argues that these facilities aren't just scientific endeavors. They represent modern humanity's attempt to rebuild the Tower of Babel.
The Tower of Babel?
Yeah. According to historical records cited in the documentary, the Tower of Babel in ancient texts wasn't just a really tall building designed out of hubris. It was designed by Nimrod, who the film argues is synonymous across cultures with Apollo, Osiris, and Gilgamesh, to literally breach the firmament.
To break through.
Exactly, to open a gateway into the dwelling place of God. The source suggests CERN is a technological attempt to pry open the very same portals the ancient Anasazi carved into the rocks.
It's an incredible theory, but the documentary doesn't stop in the Swiss Alps or the American Southwest. To find the ultimate proof of this hidden pattern, it looks squarely at the capital of the United States.
Yeah, this is where it hits home.
It claims the blueprint for this entire agenda is hardwired into Washington, D.C.
The layout and architecture of Washington, D.C. is where the documentary finds its most concrete, institutionalized evidence of an occult blueprint. And it traces this back directly to the Founding Fathers, specifically Thomas Jefferson.
Now, wait, we know George Washington hired Pierre-Charles L'Enfant to design the city.
Right.
It's a grid system with diagonal avenues. What is so occult about that?
Well, L'Enfant designed the street grid, yes. But the documentary focuses on the buildings themselves, specifically the Capitol building. The historical records show that Jefferson actually rejected all the normal, standard architectural plans submitted for the design of the capital city.
Okay.
Instead, he specifically pushed for a layout that mimicked the Roman Pantheon, which was a structure historically dedicated to all the pagan gods of the Roman Empire.
Okay, but to be fair, Jefferson was a massive classical scholar. Admiring Roman architecture doesn't automatically mean you're trying to summon ancient deities.
On its own? No, it doesn't. But the documentary dives deep into the strange case of a man named Constantino Brumidi, and this is where the timeline gets incredibly complex.
Yeah, I had never heard of this guy before.
Most people haven't. Brumidi was a famous Greek-Italian artist who had cut his teeth working in Rome, specifically restoring frescoes for the Vatican. But then, he abruptly emigrates to the United States and immediately begins working closely with the Jesuit order in New York.
And here's where the investigator points out a massive anomaly in the historical record.
Huh.
In 1854, the Jesuits and the Freemasons finance a trip for Brumidi to travel to Old Mexico.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah, and his mission, to make copious, highly detailed notes and sketches of the Aztec calendar stone, which is this massive, intricate basalt monument. And as soon as Brumidi completes this extensive study, he returns to Washington, D.C., and is immediately commissioned as the official U.S. government painter.
He is put straight to work painting the inside of the U.S. Capitol dome. And what does he paint? In the famous frieze of American history at the base of the dome, out of all the possible events in the colonization of the Americas he could have depicted, he paints the Aztec calendar stone.
Which makes no sense historically.
None. And he doesn't just paint the stone as an abstract circle. He includes a very specific figure hiding in the center of the imagery. Tanatia, the Aztec sun god, depicted with his tongue sticking out at the world.
Think about the layout of Washington, D.C. less like a map for traffic and more like a massive architectural motherboard.
Well, that's a good way to put it.
The documentary argues that just as a motherboard is designed to channel electricity to a processor, DC's streets and monuments were laid out to channel occult energy directly to the Capitol building. And sitting in the center of that processor is Tanatia.
Yeah.
Historically, Tanatia was the god who demanded endless human sacrifice. According to Spanish colonial records, over 20,000 living humans were sacrificed to him every single year just to keep the sun moving.
Unbelievable bloodshed.
And this entity is secretly painted into the heart of the U.S. Capitol building, directly under the rotunda.
The documentary uses this to suggest a hidden continuity of belief among the elite. But the most glaring piece of evidence is the massive fresco painted at the very apex of the Capitol dome, also by Brumidi. It's called the Apotheosis of Washington.
And apotheosis literally means the elevation of a human to the status of a god.
Right. And this painting shows George Washington ascending into heaven. But he's not surrounded by angels or Jesus or any Christian imagery you would expect from the founding of a supposedly Christian nation.
No.
He's surrounded entirely by pagan deities. He's sitting next to Vulcan, the god of fire and the forge, Mercury and Neptune.
It's all Greek and Roman gods.
Exactly. The documentary argues that the city is laid out as a magical construct based on ancient Egyptian and Roman beliefs, specifically to mirror the mythology of Osiris. The Washington Monument, which is literally a massive Egyptian obelisk in the Capitol dome, are architectural representations of ancient fertility and resurrection rituals.
According to esoteric traditions, these structures are designed to spiritually raise Osiris from the dead and incarnate his spirit into the leaders of the nation.
Which, again, sounds completely unhinged until you look at the final, most disturbing piece of evidence the documentary presents.
Right.
It's the climax of the whole theory. Because you might think, well, Brumidi was just an eccentric artist, and Jefferson just liked columns. But there is a prophecy hiding in plain sight that verifies this exact agenda. In fact, it's sitting in your wallet right now.
Yeah, the source material focuses heavily on the Great Seal of the United States, which is printed on the back of the $1 bill. It features the uncapped pyramid with the all-seeing eye hovering above it. We've all seen it.
Everyone has seen it.
But it's the Latin phrases surrounding it that carry the actual prophecy: Annuit coeptis and Novus Ordo Seclorum.
Now, we've all heard the phrase New World Order thrown around in conspiracy circles for decades. But the documentary does something really vital here. It traces exactly where these specific Latin phrases came from.
Because they aren't just generic mottos some politician made up.
No, they are adapted directly from the ancient Roman poet Virgil, specifically from his epic poem The Aeneid and his Eclogue 4.
Yes. Annuit coeptus translates to, he approves our undertaking, which was originally a prayer to Jupiter, or more accurately in the older mythos, Saturn. But Novus Ordo Seclorum is where the deep prophecy lies.
Yeah, this is the key.
It isn't just a political statement about a new democracy. It is taken directly from a line delivered by the Cumean Sibyl.
And for those who don't know the history, the Cumean Sibyl was the most famous prophetess of antiquity. She resided in a cave in Italy and was the official oracle of Apollo. She supposedly channeled the messages directly from the underworld.
Precisely. And when you read the original unedited prophecy from Virgil that these phrases are pulled from, it is chilling.
It's very dark.
It doesn't just say a new order of the ages is beginning. The full prophecy predicts that the majestic roll of circling centuries will begin anew, and it heralds the return of old Saturn's reign.
Saturn, who in these occult and esoteric traditions is often equated with Satan, or at the very least, the dark primordial gods of chaos.
The prophecy continues, stating that a new breed of men will be sent down from heaven, and it predicts the coming of a divine son. The text explicitly says, "Thine own Apollo reigns."
Yeah, Apollo reigns.
The documentary makes a compelling case that the Great Seal is a literal documented prophecy predicting the return of Apollo, who is identified across ancient cultures as Osiris in Egypt or Nimrod in Babylon, the original builder of the Tower of Babel.
And the imagery ties right back to the indigenous legends we started with, which is the crazy part.
Hold a quicker call.
Yeah. The Great Seal features a pyramid with exactly 13 steps. The documentary points out that the Mayan calendar, which also famously ends in a 13-step cycle, prophesies the exact same thing. The return of their feathered serpent god descending from the heavens.
Right.
Whether you call him Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan, Apollo, or Osiris, the film argues that these vastly different, geographically separated cultures are all prophesying the exact same entity returning to Earth.
Which brings all these incredibly disparate threads. I mean, the Anasazi cannibalism, the Navajo legends, the CERN collider, and the U.S. Capitol into a single, cohesive, albeit terrifying theory.
It really ties it all together.
The documentary synthesizes this by explaining the ancient esoteric concept of the four ages of man: the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. The Golden Age was the era when the gods, or the alien entities, depending on the nomenclature you prefer, physically ruled the earth and mingled with humanity.
Right. And the Silver and Bronze Ages saw the bloodlines of the gods and the Nephilim slowly wiped out, notably by the Great Flood mentioned by both the Navajo elders and in Genesis.
Leaving us currently in the Iron Age, a time where humanity is largely disconnected from the divine or the supernatural.
Yeah.
But the source argues that the prophecy on the Great Seal, the multidimensional rituals at CERN, the energetic alignment of Washington, D.C., and the ancient portals carved in Chaco Canyon, they are all pointing toward a deliberate, coordinated effort by those in power to return humanity to the Golden Age.
But the critical question is, how do they actually achieve that in the modern era?
Right, because they aren't just chanting in caves anymore.
Exactly. The source argues that modern transhumanism, the push to technologically merge man with machine, to alter human DNA, to rewrite our genetic code using tools like CRISPR, is not just a scientific evolution.
It's spiritual.
It is. The documentary frames it as the technological fulfillment of an ancient dark ritual.
Yeah.
It argues that altering the human genome is the literal realization of the Cumean Sibyl's prophecy to create a new breed of men. And these men are genetically engineered not for health or longevity, but to be empty vessels for these returning interdimensional entities.
So what does this all mean for us? I mean, it is an overwhelming amount of information, and it fundamentally upends the rational, sanitized version of history we're all taught in school.
It's a lot to process.
It is. The documentary makes massive logical leaps, connecting string theory to ancient demonology. But the takeaway is this. Whether you view these symbols as literal interdimensional portals that monsters crawl out of, or simply as incredibly powerful psychological metaphors used for control, you have to acknowledge one undeniable fact.
The fact that the people in power, from the architects of Washington, D.C. to the directors at advanced physics labs, have taken these symbols, these ancient gods, and these dark rituals deadly seriously for centuries.
Yeah.
They have spent billions of dollars carving them into our institutions, hiding them in our monuments, and embedding them in the very financial system that runs our lives.
Right. It's not accidental.
It forces a critical reevaluation of the spaces we inhabit. The official story is almost always a sanitized veneer placed over a much older, much darker reality.
Which leaves us with one final, very unsettling thought for you to carry today. The next time you buy a coffee or pay a toll and you pull a $1 bill out of your pocket, well, really look at the back of it.
Yeah, take a close look.
Look at that floating, disembodied eye above the 13-step pyramid, hovering right above the words, "In God We Trust." After everything we've uncovered today about the panic of the Anasazi, the Navajo warnings of mind-controlling entities, the infrared searches for portals, and the Roman prophecies encoded in that very seal, you have to ask yourself, according to the documentary, it just might be the exact one the ancient ones were hiding from.